Attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay.
Hello everybody, and welcome to our webinar here this evening. You're very welcome. We have a really big turnout here this evening again, so again thank you very much for everybody who's taken time to come and listen to us. Our webinar this evening is about the essentials that are really needed to get the best out of your winter training. So it's your winter training checklist. Slightly different to maybe your traditional webinar talking about specific training sessions or specific periodization of training. What we're trying to look at here is other areas that are as critical to performance, looking at areas of your lifestyle, looking at equipment, looking at how to balance your training and really get the most out of the sessions that you're doing. And a lot of times we feel these can be sometimes overlooked because of maybe too much of a focus on the actual training themselves. So we're looking at very much the wider issues of development during the winter period to get the most out of your training. Okay, so as many of you know, Dig Deep Coaching is a global cycling and triathlon coaching company. We're here to help every level of athlete develop, and we coach people right across the globe, and we're very fortunate to have an extremely knowledgeable and vastly experienced team of coaches and nutritionists and specialists that work alongside us. We're also one of the leading retailers of power meters, certainly the Quarq, PowerTap, Verve, and the like. So we're certainly make sure that we try and get the best tools possible. We're obviously one of the distributors of Pactimo clothing in the United States, so we do custom clothing as well. We also have a retail store, Pactimo UK, and we partner with a lot of companies worldwide like Pactimo, and obviously the Sufferfest training videos, which is a fantastic tool for all these people, unfortunately having to stay inside, but again it's something that we're very proud of. So tonight with us, joining me is Dan Fleeman.
Hello, good evening, welcome to the webinar.
Dan is, along with myself, one of the directors of Dig Deep Coaching, and we're going to try and go through, like I say, as much as possible. So hopefully we can bring our practical experience from our own times racing and training, and also the experience we have from looking after and coaching a wide range of people. So so let's get started, because we do have quite a bit to go through. Okay, so the webinar content this evening, we're going to start off by going through, are you ready to start? Looking at, are you, is your equipment, is your bike, is your body ready to get going? We'll also look at your specific equipment that we believe is needed to really maximize the training. A core strength, looking at the alternative workouts that can be done, why it should be done, and the consequences of potentially not doing it. Indoor training sessions, for a lot of us in the northern hemisphere, unfortunately the bad weather and the winter has brought us inside, so we're going to look at how we can deal with that and how to best maximize that. Training phases, looking at how we can build, progress, and how best to pinpoint performance on your training to go towards a specific goal. Overtraining, or under-resting might be another way to put that. So we're going to talk about overtraining, certainly how it can be a very large factor in a lot of people's preparation, and how it can be very detrimental. And also dealing with illness. Unfortunately, during the winter time, the likelihood of picking up colds and flus and infections and whatnot is quite high. So we'll be talking a wee bit about illness and how we can deal with illness. And at the end, we're going to try and get through a number of questions that you can ask. So you'll see in your little control panel there's a bit where you can add in questions. So during the webinar, if you would like to type in maybe questions that you would like us to answer at the end, maybe there's something that we can expand on, something that maybe we haven't mentioned that you feel you would like to know, just type it in there, and at the end we'll maybe get 10 minutes or so to try and get through as many questions as possible on maybe some of the topics that we've covered, or maybe there's something in particular that you have not seen us mention, or you would like us to maybe expand on more, so feel free to put that in. Hopefully the sound quality is quite good. I do know sometimes, depending on people's devices, there can be some interference and whatnot, but we will be recording this webinar, so if you do have some issues with sound quality at the minute, we will send it out, and usually the quality is better whenever it's listening to the recording. So okay, so let's get going. We have quite a bit to go through. So okay, are you ready? Again, we need to, we're looking right from the basics. We'll have to go see what is needed to be right before you start training. So immune system, one of the most critical areas of development. What we're trying to do is making sure that whenever you're started, that it's completely you're completely healthy, that you're illness and sickness free, that potential any lasting viruses or illnesses that was coming up during the season is completely gone. And what we really want to do is make sure that you're going to avoid prolonged periods off the bike. This can really lead to problems obviously during the season. A pure immune system will really make sure that you won't make the adaptations in your training. It's certainly something that a lot of us have seen, and we're going to talk a lot more about in the illness section at the end of the webinar. But really, before you get going, you want to make sure that you're obviously fit and healthy and ready to get into frequency of structured training again. Injury, again, same as above, making sure that you're injury free. Any niggles or any sprains or any problems that you may have before or during the season is already done before you start again. Again, this is the time now that you can take off, that you can do maybe specific work with a physio, or you can take a rest before you get going. So really make the most of this time now to make sure that you're injury free and everything's cleared up. And the last one, dental care. Maybe some of you might think, why is dental care on it? Well, for anybody here who has had issues with their teeth, root canals or wisdom teeth being taken out or whatnot, I think they all understand why it's so critical. Most dental care will affect your performance, your training. You might need to take up to a couple of weeks off. Obviously, the ability to get adequate nutrition whenever you're getting dental work in is obviously affected as well. So that has a knock-on effect on the amount of training that you can do. So really now is the time to, I suppose, go and get your teeth done. So what we're trying to say here is really give your body a full MOT or a full go over to make sure that you're ready to go. And unfortunately, this is something we see that people fail to do, and then injuries, illnesses, and maybe dental care or whatever crops up later on in the winter. Whenever we're really got to be going. Dan, is there anything you would like to add to that?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing to add there is prevention is obviously better than cure. If you spend a little bit of time now, I always go to the osteopath at the end of the season, go to the doctor, get checked up, and dentist, and just make sure everything's in order before you start training, because it would only take 1 or 2 days to do all those things, and then you're safe in the knowledge that you're not going to get any problems. Whereas if you start training and you get a month or two into a training block, and at Christmas time you have to take 2 weeks off the bike because you've got to have root canal surgery, it can have a big detrimental effect on your training. So getting it checked over while you're in periods of low training would be the best policy.
Okay, so next we're going to move on to equipment. Again, equipment for specific training in the winter. We normally change, or a lot of people here change their setup coming from the summer maybe into the autumn and into the winter. So you obviously will spend a considerable amount of time on your bicycle over the winter period, so you got to make sure it's right. You got to make sure it's properly fitted. You got to make sure that it's not going to be an issue regarding your posture regarding any injuries that you may get from changing your bike. So a lot of things you need to look at is obviously that exact position of your bike, the difference between that and potentially your the bike that you've been racing on, maybe during the summertime. For example, your crank length, your handlebar size, your saddle is a massive one. Again, we see people who have used maybe one saddle all summer for 7 or 8 months and all of a sudden change to another saddle that they're spending a lot of hours in cold weather and wet weather, and of course that's where certainly saddle sores can come in. Another one is just looking at your crank length. Is it similar or the same as what you've been doing on your summer bike? A lot of people potentially don't even know that there's maybe a different crank length, and of course this can lead to injuries. When you look at thousands and thousands of rotations that we make on our legs whenever we're turning the pedals, it doesn't take a lot to understand that it can cause an injury. So maybe really trying to look at your equipment, trying to make sure that the fit is adequate, and making sure that you're not going to have a lasting effect of an injury or whatnot coming from that. Time trial bike. Again, a lot of people obviously focus on time trials. A lot of people maybe dip their toes in it, or maybe it's something that they do during stage races. And unfortunately, it's neglected. A lot of people neglect it. They don't touch their time trial bike for, maybe 2 months, 3 months, or even some people don't even touch it for 6 months. And then all of a sudden expect to jump on it come the springtime and hope for the best. Anybody who's used a time trial bike will know the difference in biomechanics, the difference in your body's ability to put power through the pedals in a different position, and how it can take time to adapt. And this is not something that you want to lose, certainly during the winter, and this can be done purely by spending maybe 1 day a week on the turbo trainer or on the rollers on your time trial bike. And it, again, for those of you that are time trial specific, whose main objective is time trialing, it should probably be more time spent on the time trial bike, but certainly it's something that you just shouldn't leave and gather dust in. Something you should try and put into your overall training. Power, heart rate, cadence sensors. What is essential? Well, obviously a lot of people find it difficult to justify the price of potentially a power meter. But the very basic of what most people have is probably a heart rate monitor and or a cadence sensor as well. And for me, them two are a real, a real must in developing. We're going to talk a little bit about training and training zones later on, but to get the basics of your development and the basics of how you need to structure your training, heart rate monitor, knowing how to work it, being able to download it, being able to analyze it, keeping a diary of what you're doing, that's the sort of material and that's the sort of equipment that you need. If you're spending thousands on a bicycle, then a couple of £100 or dollars on a heart rate monitor and a cadence sensor is certainly going to be worthwhile and maximise the other expenditures that you've had. Turbo trainers and rollers. Again, I suppose most people in the Northern Hemisphere unfortunately have to spend a lot of time on turbo trainers and rollers and training inside. Which is best? I suppose a lot of people have different views on which is best. But for me, maybe a turbo trainer, you can certainly get the most out of maybe different sessions. You can vary your workouts potentially more, and it's certainly good for you can now hook it up to different devices and Wahoo kickers, and certainly getting power data in there to Trainer Road and Swift and whatnot. But and obviously rollers for me is certainly a personal favourite. I would have spent a lot of times on rollers developing leg speed. Certainly very good for your agility, very good for your confidence, your bike handling, for your stability, and as a really good tool certainly for the younger riders out there, schoolboys up in the juniors, getting a bit of confidence. And it's a really good way to again develop that stability and that leg speed. And for me, certainly rollers was a great one, and I think now a lot of rollers are coming with different tensions, so you're able to vary the workouts slightly. But it's I think one of them tools, either turbo trainers and rollers, is essential for us in the Northern Hemisphere, that unfortunately have to put up with dark nights and cold weather. Dan, is there anything you'd like to add to?
Yeah, I think for me the biggest two things here is bike setup. Certainly, I'm a big believer in all your bikes should be as close as possible to each other in fitting. It amazes me when people have a winter bike which is completely different position to their summer bike, or even different crank lengths, like you said before. I even knew one guy once who had a left and right crank which was 5mm difference. He didn't even realise. So I'd always spend a lot of time getting my bikes the same. A friend of mine owns a bike fitting studio, and at the start of each season I'm always constantly there with, he's got a jig to replicate positions from bike to bike, and you know, everything has to be exact to the millimetre, otherwise we have to start again. And it's just like you say, if you spend so much time pedaling the bike, the more chances of getting injuries. So always, I mean, the contact points are important, so always same size cranks, always the same pedals, always the same saddle, and if possible even the same handlebars, and even the brake gear hoods. Different manufacturers have different offsets of, so the position could be 4 or 5mm different just by having a different type of STI shifter, which could make quite a difference to the overall fit of the bike. And then the other thing is, again, like you mentioned, TT bikes. It really does astound me that people who are specialists in time trialists, or that's one of their objectives, just put their time trial bike away in October and don't get it out again until March. I'd be riding it at least once, possibly twice a week. Even if it was only on the turbo trainer. If you don't want to take it outside, then that's fine, but get it on the turbo trainer. Especially if you're a time trial specialist, just leave it on the turbo trainer all winter and just get used to riding. You need to get used to position, but you also need to get used to putting the power out in that position, because with a time trial bike, with the aerodynamic position, you're always going to have a lag of, you won't be able to quite get the same power on a time trial bike as you can on a road bike. But the better time trialists, so the likes of Bradley Wiggins, they can get very close to the power, or even can get the power the same, but in a much more aerodynamic position. But that takes a lot of practice, so just train on your time trial bike as much as possible. That would be my recommendation.
Okay, thanks very much. Okay, the next one, a core strength. So really, once you've got your bike set up, your bike is efficient and built for you, I suppose now is the time to really make sure you're getting the body ready, and the body making sure it's stable and strong and really primed for action. And getting these components right will certainly see your way onto certainly better performances. Of course, aerobic training is a priority for cyclists. Cycling is predominantly an aerobic sport, but cycling also involves the entire body, and this is something that cyclists are very good at neglecting. And we also need to make sure, again, I come to the point where a weak core equals weak performance. A weak core will have a negative effect on your stability, on your lumbar region, and certainly your pelvic position will suffer. You'll start to bring in a rocking position, rocking on the bike. Again, this is all coming from a weak core, and when you're starting to see that rocking, it's obviously going to lead to injuries, poor biomechanics, and you're just not getting the power through the pedals. You don't need to look too far in the professional peloton to see the technique, the efficiency, and certainly the style of the riders when under pressure. And this isn't by chance. The sense and the focus on this type of training within the professional peloton has changed vastly in the last 10 years. Certainly the amount and the quality of I suppose the core work and the strength work that's done by individuals in professional peloton is really year round now. And you know, you look at riders from Tom Boonen on the cobbles and how still he is, to certainly guys like Nibali and whatnot, or even looking at Bradley Wiggins certainly on the climbs. You know how much they are very stable and how much they're able to get the power through the pedals. We don't need to be an elite cyclist to want to have that. Okay, that should be across the board. So having strong legs and having a strong lower body, but having a poor core, having a poor upper body, we're really not maximising the ability that we have. Okay, so you know, this is something again that now is the time, I suppose, to get into routines, to focus on certainly on specific areas to develop, and making sure that it is something that isn't a chore. That again, we're willing to do it potentially more focused this time of the year at a higher frequency, certainly maybe 2 or 3 times during the week, but also maintaining some sort of workout and some sort of stability during the season. And you know, we see a lot of riders let that slip during the year. You know, certainly during the season, of course, the cycling is starting to be increased, the competition is starting to be increased. Time can be a little bit more scarce, but it can be as big a benefit to maybe take, you know, 10, 20 minutes off a training session to get some specific work in like this, you know, once a week, certainly to maintain your position and maintain that core strength. So really, what should I do and how much? Your glutes and your lower back are, I mean, major parts of your body being efficient to get the power through. You know, again, it makes no sense to have strong legs and really have no upper body. Building from core and stability, starting to get the movements right, and then I know a lot of our guys, and we see now a lot of cyclists starting to get into the plyometric type exercises where it can be involving a lot more fast and explosive movements. So what we're trying to do is trying to build your body strength and using that movement to bring it into using the speed, because what we're trying to obviously do is making this exercise specific to cycling and wanting to see the benefits of it in cycling. So that's what we've got to see. And what again I think a lot of people seem to do is they see the winter time as a time to go to the gym, to squat as heavy weights as they can, and you know, maybe do exercises that, you know, general people are doing. But certainly we would advise trying to go and making sure that it's very specific to cycling, very specific to your needs and getting the most out of it. We did a webinar this time last year with one of our friends, Timothy Cassidy from Dublin, who went through 1.5 hours of very specific workouts, strength workouts, core workouts, and stretching routines that are very specific for cycling. So please go to our website and go to our webinars and have a look at that for a very in-depth knowledge and information on it. But certainly it's something that, you know, you should be starting to get into and building it really around your indoor sessions. I mean, for me, there's a lot of guys now that are probably going from 2 to 3 times a week, and being able to maintain at least 2 times a week of 45 minutes to maybe 1.25 hour sessions, 2 times a week, 3 times a week, as the training is starting to increase. And as you adapt more to it, as you're maybe able to do more exercises and you're able to recover better from the core workout, you're able to maintain or increase also the amount of training, aerobic training you're doing. You know, what is, you know, quite detrimental to your overall performance is trying to do too much core strength, trying to do too much gym work, but also trying to maintain or increase the aerobic workout too quickly. Your body's not adapting so much to one area, and you're putting an extra stress on it. That's going to lead to a lot of muscle fatigue that can bring to certainly the onset of injury. So making sure that it's progressive, making sure that it's targeted, and you know, again, something that shouldn't so much be a chore. And you know, again, making sure that everything you're doing is specific to cycling. Dan, is there anything you would like to?
No, not really. I think you covered everything there. Certainly, like you mentioned, exercises need to be cycling specific, otherwise, you know, I'm not really a big fan of doing weight training as such, but some people are, and they end up, you know, doing big weights and developing, you know, very muscular legs. But you know, if your muscles, if you can't fire that muscle, then you know it's not going to help your cycling. So, you know, I wouldn't be looking to do big weights in anything you do. Any core exercises or weights just need to be very specific to cycling.
Yeah, and I suppose one of the things that we see is people going to classes, maybe gym classes and whatnot, and it can be from a general sense, which can be good, but for those people who are maybe looking to make the most of their time and wanting to make it cycling specific, do a bit of research, talk to people obviously like yourselves, and you know, making sure that you're getting the most out of it and that it's specific to you. But also, this type of training should be prioritised for those people who have injuries, those people who maybe need isolated work on certain muscle groups to help develop, to stop injuries from occurring again in the following year, and maybe using it as a rehab. And for that, there certainly should be prioritised as well. So again, something, check out our webinar we did before, and there is you know, a lot of really good information there from Timothy Cassidy from Peak Physical Therapy. So okay, indoor sessions. So we did talk a little bit about turbo trainers and rollers at the start, and why they should be part of your I suppose, equipment choice for the winter time. Really, why should it be done? Why should we use indoor training sessions? It's very easy to make session specific, make them targeted. Again, we don't have the interference of wind, rain, roundabouts, whatnot, so we can really make it specific. So whenever we're doing maybe interval sessions, whenever we're doing technique work, we can very much focus on the seconds, the minutes, the cadences that we're doing, and also the intensity that we're going at. So again, this is something that we find probably very hard to do. There's too many external influences when we're out on the road. So being inside makes it very focused and very easy to get specific. Time per, for those people who know about getting up at 6 in the morning or 5:30 in the morning to get it fit in a session, it's a lot easier to come downstairs into your warm house or into your garage and not put on 20 layers of clothes and go out in the dark. It's a lot easier to come downstairs, put on a Sufferfest training video or you know, one of our specific sessions and get moving on it for 45 minutes to an hour. You're safe. You're not having a lot of time spent getting ready to head out. You're not having the time spent coming back. So, you know, it makes it a lot easier to do. We find for certainly people who are time poor, if you have the, you know, maybe the reliance of saying, okay, well, I'm going to do an hour and a half or 1 hour 45 minutes, and it's difficult to fit in, you're more likely to bin the session if you can't fit it all in. But if it's only 45 minutes or if it's only 1 hour, you're more likely to actually do it. Okay, so, you know, again, we can do that inside. We can make it very specific. We can work on technique. We can work on, you know, certain intensities, very refined. And for us, it's really important that we can do that. So for those people that are time poor, it's really good. Combining with cross training, a little bit on going with core. We have a lot of our guys can do maybe do quite an intensive turbo session or technique work, and straight after that they're into some sort of core workout or gym workout. For those people that have the luxury of having the equipment in their house, again, it doesn't take a whole lot to, I suppose, to get proper technique and being able to maximize your strength in your core workouts. You can do it certainly in your own house with a small amount of equipment. Combining that with some indoor turbo sessions, we find works very well, especially those people that are maybe coming from rehab and starting to go into rehab. They're able to do a small wee bit of aerobic activity based in around obviously their rehab work as well, and reduce risk of illness and injury. The reason I mean that is because the likelihood of getting ill outside, the likelihood of getting colds certainly in the dark nights and whatnot, is the likelihood of obviously having an accident is a lot more. So you're reducing that risk, and you're reducing the risk of going out into the cold weather to train. So inside you can certainly control your environment quite well. How to maximise the sessions? Generally more intensive than the road. Again, doing specific interval work. We do have a section here where we are going to talk about high intensity training and the pros and cons of that, so we'll probably elaborate a bit more on it. Focusing on weaknesses. Certainly indoor sessions allows us again to focus on particular sessions, but we can very much target areas of performance, like maybe somebody's ability to put out a real high power and low torque. It was very easy to control that inside with new technology, with the new turbo trainers that you see. We can really adapt I suppose, the geography that we're virtually riding in, and it's really good to make sessions very specific. So focusing on weaknesses, we can really target that in midweek or indoor sessions. But building the frequency of sessions over 2 to 3 months. Again, a lot of our athletes here in Northern Europe are probably on the turbo trainer maybe once into twice a week at the minute. I suppose the average will be going in towards 3 times a week, midweek normally, going towards December time, January time. And we also have a lot of our clients, certainly in North America and whatnot, who spend potentially 3 months, 4 months of the year solely inside, purely because of the adverse weather and the snow, and the likelihood of injury from going outside. And unfortunately for them, they are obviously spending 100% of the time inside. But we have seen considerable improvements in them people by doing focused indoor workouts. It does take quite a bit of dedication and quite a bit of motivation, but using tools like the Sufferfest training videos and the motivation you can get from that, there's no excuse where years ago, like myself, spent many years in a garage or in a shed looking at a wall. Wasn't exactly the most enjoyable listen to a crackly radio, but now certainly with all the mod cons and technology, it should make that a little bit easier. So I'm combining rollers for technique and efficiency. I hit on it slightly earlier on, just about the very good benefits that can come from using rollers. For those of you that maybe have never used rollers and have thought about it for the first time, certainly put a couple of mattresses either side, because you probably will crash. Don't worry about it, everybody does it, or put it in between a door frame or whatnot, but certainly is a really good way to get into technique. And again, for young riders as well, it's certainly a good way to start off. So I suppose that's my take on indoor sessions. Dan, is there anything you would like to add to that?
Yeah, I think for me the biggest thing with training turbo trainers is it's real-time training. So if you go out on the road and maybe do 90 minutes or 2 hours of training, you're probably going to spend at least 20 minutes of that freewheeling, on downhills or stopping at traffic lights, that sort of thing. Whereas on a turbo trainer, there is really no freewheeling. So if you just do an hour's training on the turbo trainer, you get as much done as if you did probably 90 minutes outside. So for people that are short on time, it's it's really good. You can jump on the turbo trainer, you get an hour session, really intensive, really good quality, and you're pedaling the whole time. And like Stephen said, as the years have gone on, the technology in turbo trainers is just, it's incredible how they've changed throughout the years. With now you've got like the interactive turbo trainers. You can even design. You can download or even design your own workouts. So if you want to do, for example, 5 sets of 5-minute intervals at a certain wattage on these, like the Cyclops Power Beam turbo trainer or the Wahoo Kicker, you can actually program it into computer programs, and it will put the resistance onto the turbo. So all you have to do is pedal, and the resistance will go on and then come off at the the periods that you've set. And you can even you can even race people online now. So again, it means it's just not mind-numbing like in the old days you're in your shed or in your garage and you're just staring at walls, whereas now you're actually looking at a computer screen, you're racing people, you're actually going for targets. But the one thing I will say is a lot of people find it difficult to maintain the same power, the same heart rate on a turbo, and a lot of that is because your body core temperature goes through the roof. Even like when I ride the turbo train, I do it in my garage, which is quite a cool environment. But even so, after 10 minutes of pedaling, you soon work up a sweat, and it's very humid. So if you go to Argos or any online electrical store, you can buy a fan that kind of rotates, a big fan on a stand. For 25-30 pounds, you can get quite a good one, and just have that as close as possible. So it just keeps your body core temperature down, and that will really help you maintain any sort of intensity.
Yeah, and I think it's people have to be aware of that. When they're working to zones, either power zones or heart rate zones. Certainly as you sweat more, your blood plasma starts to come down, your heart rate's gonna elevate, and whenever you're looking at power, you can and what we do is adapt maybe your training power zones to inside to outside. We see guys that depending on where your power meter is located, the type of turbo trainer as well can change the actual power that's coming out. So it can be up to maybe 5 to 7% difference in your power of what you can put out on a turbo trainer to what you can put out on the road, just purely from the torque and the drive chain. So again, please be aware of that. So I know a lot of people who maybe use such things, they're doing maybe an FTP test inside, and they are at 300 watts, and outside they can do 330. A lot of that is down obviously to the drive chain and trying to get the power through the pedals, and also where the power meter is certainly located, and the type of turbo trainer. So again, it varies greatly. So just be aware of that.
I think the new direct drive turbo trainers, so like the Cyclops Silencer or the Wahoo Kicker, does reduce that quite a lot, because you take your rear wheel out and you put the bike directly onto the turbo, and that's what generates the resistance. And I've got one, and it feels very much more road specific than the old mag type trainer. It's very jolty. You don't really get that. Anymore.
Okay. Next, we're going on to training phases. And again, this is something that probably a lot of us focus on, and probably a lot of us are thinking about. And again, we've done many webinars, seminars, training days on this particular one topic, so we're going to try and expand on it quite a bit. But what we're trying to do is just to give you ideas on what you need to think about when you're starting off your training. So really, why structure your training? Making sure that you're building through the correct steps. Again, working with people like ourselves, our coaching staff certainly help set them steps out, making sure that each step that you go through in your winter preparation is that which is needed towards your overall goal. So by not doing a step properly, not focusing on a certain area of performance at a certain time, and not doing it adequately, will leave it that you're not getting the most out of future training. So that's really why you want to structure. It can be as basic as possible, but you really have to try and structure your training in a certain way that you can get the most out of it. And that is really critical for those people who are I suppose time poor as well, which we'll expand on. But for us, you've got to work on key areas that's needed for you, key areas that is needed for your performance to improve, and not looking at what a lot of other people are doing. So again, making sure that you're structured, looking at, we're coming towards the end of October, what is going to be needed in the next 4 to 5 to 6 months towards the springtime, potentially towards the spring goal, and try and set that out as well as possible. Again, we do that with our clients, and do that with their training, stepping through all the actual proper the proper structure as you build towards a goal. Key components of your training and training phases: volume, intensity, and frequency. And it's critical that you balance all of these and to develop each of them individually and then combine. What we see is that people try to develop maybe two of these components, their volume and intensity at the same time, or, God forbid, all three at the same time, and that's whenever overtraining, overreaching occurs, and it's a time whenever you're starting to not maximise the days that you're spending on the bike because of fatigue and because the intensity is too high. So when you're looking at training phases, when you're looking at individual training days into weeks, into months, you've got to combine it into these three areas: volume, intensity, and frequency, and making sure that these three areas are in check constantly, and making sure that you're not combining two or three of these areas in one go, and it's going to lead to too much training stress that brings around overtraining and overreaching. Again, we're going to expand a little bit on that overreaching phase, but certainly is something that you need to prioritise whenever you're planning your training. Setting aims for 2016. Again, for some of us, 2016 racing season can seem, still quite far away, but you do have to have some sort of objective. You do have to have some sort of aim that you're going for. It can be maybe quite vague or it can be quite specific, but having an aim and maybe having an event that you feel that you're aiming for is very good for us now to be able to set the bricks in place to help build the foundations towards your overall performances. So maybe you're poor in your climbing, now is the time to start working on climbing technique, maybe not intensity. So come the springtime, the technique is good and we're able to build on the intensity on top of that to really bring it up. So it can be as simple as that, but setting your aims allows you to evaluate and certainly progress during winter. And that brings us on nicely under our next step of evaluating your strengths and weaknesses. Looking at what went wrong in the early season or during the season, looking at what went right, maybe looking at your previous training files, your training data, your history, trying to probably look at what you feel should have been done during the season and with hindsight what you would have done different, and making sure that is being put into your training now and putting into your structure over the next 4 to 5 months. So don't just, I see a lot of people, they'll say to me, oh yeah, no, I'm not good at climbing or I'm not good at sprinting, and they do the same training of what they've done the last couple of years to bring around the same result. So evaluate your strengths and weaknesses and act on it. Avoiding junk training, again, really especially for those people who are time poor, for the majority of us who have families, who have work stresses with, that are really finding it hard to fit in sessions, avoiding the junk. And by that I mean avoiding training for the sake of training. So trying to make it specific, trying to make it targeted, and trying to make it regimented towards everything that I've mentioned above. So we just don't want to be training for the sake of training. Again, especially for those people that are motivated and that are very specific and certainly want to bring around a big performance, really avoid the junk. Again, working with our coaching team and certainly our staff helps avoid adding in junk. We do all probably enjoy the odd coffee spin or out with your friends, which is great, but for the mainstay, for those of you that certainly have ambitions in the future, making sure that you're reducing the junk as much as possible. Dan, is there anything you would like to?
Yeah, I think, like you say, avoid the junk. For time poor cyclists, people with busy lives and work commitments, family commitments, quality over quantity is really the key. And certainly what most people I coach who are short on time would definitely work on high intensity, short volume rides during the week. So like we said, 1 hour, really specific, really intense turbo training sessions, and then at the weekend, you know, doing your club runs, doing your group rides, that sort of thing, when you've got more time. You know, that can work really well. You can get some decent rides at the weekend and some really intense quality sessions in the week. So that's certainly the way I would structure training for people on limited time.
Okay. We're just gonna keep on the topic of training phases, and something that a lot of us, I suppose, focus on during this part of the year is building endurance. Building endurance probably means something different to each person. But again, it's a critical part of cycling, critical part of performance, having a good base. But you know, there's a lot of ways to bring that around, and sometimes, again, depending on the discipline that you are trying to aim for, this focus can be overriding, and you know, and it can allow you to neglect other areas that are as critical, if not more critical, to your overall performance come your event. So you know, you got to make sure that it's certainly not overriding. So building endurance is something that a lot of us are starting to think about now. What you see here is one of the graphs and training zones that is designed by Andy Coggan. You know, I would probably use these training zones and training levels for the majority, and I know they're quite popular across the world. So you know, you're going from your level 1, which is obviously your active recovery, level 2 your endurance, your tempo, starting to go into level 4, which is in around your threshold, starting to encroach on your FTP at the lower part of level 4, level 5 up into your VO2, and into level 6 certainly your anaerobic ability. So you can see here just on the graphs is obviously the training effect, and at each particular zone what it has on your threshold power. Threshold power is probably one of the best indicators of certainly your endurance ability. Again, a lot of people believe maybe, okay, you're maybe only good at, you have a high power for 20 minutes or 40 minutes or whatever, but normally then people also have a very good endurance base as well. So, you know, what does it really mean? Certainly having a good endurance helps you, but you know, you will have a really good ability to use fat as a fuel. Your aerobic and skeletal system will certainly manage for long durations, and that comes down to obviously maximising your nutrition as well as your training. Trying to combine the two of them as good as possible will have a really good effect on building your endurance. Try not to neglect one from the other, but again, trying to make sure that you're getting adequate training in. You know, boosting your endurance, you know, is certainly a big aim, but you have to look at other ways to boost your endurance other than spending lots of hours in the saddle, because for the majority of us, we don't have time to spend hours and hours and hours in the saddle to try and boost your endurance. So what we're trying to do here is looking at other specific ways we can to use your endurance. So you'll see here on the semi-dotted line coming around is an area where we sort of call the sweet spot training. Sweet spot training is, again, a terminology that's kicked around quite a bit at the minute, and I suppose it's one of the very effective ways that in the areas that people train to boost their endurance. Certainly they're not riding at, you can see here, the lower levels, level 1, level 2. The majority of people that are maybe in group rides are probably spending a lot of time in either level 1 or level 2. But again, from this you can see that it doesn't have a great amount of physiological strain. It doesn't have a real big amount in your or a big effect on your threshold power. So, you know, for again looking at limited time, you're going to want to start moving it up. And that certainly isn't something that will, you know, infringe in your recovery, or certainly isn't something that's going to bring around a peak or anything like that, which again is a bit of a misconception if done right. But certainly trying to train in the upper zones, looking in towards the tempo zone, is a good way to maximise the hours that you have while bringing around endurance. You know, we've coached a lot of guys going for real big ultra endurance events, you know, between 7 to 9 hours in the saddle in one go, and the majority of their training is probably in around 2 hours. Apart from the odd 5-hour, 6-hour run, which is quite sporadic, but we're able to maximise their endurance ability purely by doing specific sessions. Again, for the majority of us here, I think we're all quite limited to time, so we're looking to focus on tempo workouts, trying to get into that sort of sweet spot training zone and spend quite a bit of time in there. So certainly it's a real good way to start boosting your endurance, rather than spending many hours in level 1 and level 2 for really little gains. Dan, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I mean, certainly recently this sort of sweet spot training has become quite, really popular. I personally started doing this back in 2007, so quite a while ago now. And at that time, I was kind of training for 5 or 6 hour road races. And then in the winter time, I was only doing 3 to 4 hour rides, but I was doing sweet spot sessions within that ride. So I'd start off maybe in short periods, so I'd do 15 to 20 minutes at the start of the ride and 15 to 20 minutes at the end of the ride. And I built that up very gradually throughout the course of the winter, until by maybe February I was doing the first hour at sweet spot and the final hour at sweet spot, for example, saying a 4-hour ride. And my first race of that season was the Tour of Algarve in Portugal, and every day was a 6-hour stage. It was like a 5 or 6 day race, and I was really a little bit unsure how things would go, and I thought, well, this will be a good test of if this training's worked, because obviously I've only been training for a maximum of 4 hours, and I've got a race for 6 hours. But what I found was I had no problems whatsoever with doing the 6-hour rides. And actually, when I really thought about it, I thought, well, when you're in a road race, the amount of time you spend if you're doing a 5 or 6 hour road race, the amount of time you spend in the bunch, not even pedaling, freewheeling, is probably an hour and a half, 2 hours anyway. So by doing 4 hours, but always pushing on at a decent pace, gave me so much endurance that I was easily able to do, a 6-hour race. And then when you factor in things like in a race, you spend a lot more time, thinking about eating and drinking and fueling. It really did help, and certainly, throughout the winter time is a great time to be building your threshold, your FTP, functional threshold, trying to build that as high as possible. And the best way to build, or the most effective way to build threshold, would be to train at threshold, but that's quite hard on the body. So you could probably only do train at actual threshold maybe 2 or 3 times a week maximum. Whereas with the sweet spot, because you're just a little bit, 7 or 8% below threshold, you could train, probably 5 times a week at do some sweet spot training. So while you're not, it's not 100% effective, because you're able to do it more often, by the end of the week, you'd actually get more out of it. So throwing in sweet spot training is really, really good. And even, like I said before, going on group rides, club runs, that sort of thing, is really good. For a social thing, it's very good for motivation and everything like that. So one way I used to do it, to combine those rides while still getting in some good quality training, was I'd always ride out to meet the group, and that may be 15 or 20 minutes away. Generally I was usually running late anyway, but so I'd end up riding at sweet spot, on the way there for maybe 15 or 20 minutes, and the same on the way back, and that just made it so it wasn't just a steady zone 2 ride. It was actually getting some good quality work in there as well.
Cool. Thanks very much. Okay, next bit is high intensity training. Again, it is a big, I suppose, a big debate in modern cycling. High intensity training during the winter. Does it work? Does it not work? And you know, it's something that we have used a lot. It's something that we have seen people work with. We've seen people have really, really good effects from it. Some people obviously haven't. But you know, what is or how does it work? High intensity training. So I think the HIIT sessions, abbreviated for high intensity training, consists of short and intense efforts. You know, looking at from sessions that develop your aerobic and anaerobic ability, using short intense sessions that are usually from, you know, anywhere from 30-second to 3-minute intervals. Probably avoiding a lot of the sessions Dan was talking about there, the tempo work, the sweet spot work, and further down. You know, that's more certainly of in the aerobic type nature. But what we're looking at is obviously you're using still your aerobic system a lot more, but you're starting to obviously recruit a lot more of your anaerobic ability and your anaerobic system. So really what it is HIIT sessions, you know, are proven to have similar metabolic adaptations to that which occur with high volume training. So really, you know, you're trying to do a different type of training to bring around the same adaptations. Although the molecular events that signal these adaptations are different, but using this high intensity training is a very good way certainly to bring on, flick that master switch and boost your aerobic ability. And again, we have seen a lot of very good responses. We again work a lot with our friends there in the Sufferfest training videos, and we have a lot of their generic training plans there, and really they are very much aimed at these sort of HIIT interval sessions. And again, the majority of the hours that people spend is anywhere between 6 to 8 hours a week, and you know, the results we have seen from, I mean, thousands of athletes across the world has really been incredible. And for us, it is a great way to see how doing structured HIIT sessions has a great way to bring around performances. And certainly it's not something that can be frowned upon, saying, okay, it's during the winter time and it shouldn't be done, etc., because it brings around a peak. If it's managed properly, and if you go back to what we said earlier on about increasing the frequency, the volume and the intensity, and making that juggling that correctly, it can be very well used. You know, when should you do it? Again, for me, it depends from person to person. With our coaches, we work very closely to make sure that it's being done at the correct times and it's being done in a way that we can get the most out of somebody getting closer to the bigger event. But certainly I think it can be balanced at certain periods during the winter. Maybe 1 or 2 week blocks of solely HIIT intensive sessions right the whole way in November, December, January can have very good gains. Certainly in keeping that muscle memory alive, really starting to look at looking at your developments, and not so much from trying to beat your PB powers or trying to take Stravas or whatever, but trying to again keep that memory of doing them sort of sessions alive. So whenever we're going to focus on it more in March and April time, that we haven't just left them sessions for 6 months and all of a sudden we're starting from scratch. So again, it can be juggled well in. But for me, primarily it should be really balanced and blended with other training models. You know, it can be done with maybe a small bit of volume training, but again, I think for us, it's something we shouldn't really shy away from. It shouldn't be something that we are looking at thinking, okay, it's going to bring around fatigue, or certainly high levels of fatigue that's going to be detrimental later on in the year. But again, high intensity training is something that can be used and really should be used, but really needs to be done in a very structured way. Overtraining and under-resting. Again, a very big part of performance, a very big part of not performing well next year. And it's something that we really need to focus on, and certainly something that everybody needs to be aware of. You know, a common misconception is the more training you do, the better you will get. But to be honest with you, I personally in my career rarely regretted taking a day off, because the effects and the benefit of taking a day off is a lot more than benefit of doing another day of training, which if it's done too much, can have a real negative effect future on. So again, really, why is it something that we have to why does it happen? Again, the biggest reasons is certainly the stress that we put on the body, and obviously not balancing what we've talked about earlier on. It has a lot of effects from outside of cycling, so I'll go into that in a minute, but certainly not just looking at cycling. And really what it is I suppose is best explained. Somebody was quoted, certainly from the elite group of coaches in the US Olympic Committee, was quoted as saying, really, overtraining or under-resting is a syndrome that results when excessive, usually physical overload on an athlete occurs without adequate rest. The excessive overload placed on the performer results in decreased performance and the ability to train. I think that sums it up really well, and certainly something that we have to look at, and certainly look at in a very structured way. And it comes down to balancing both your lifestyle and balancing obviously your training that you're doing. So it's not just about the bike. It certainly affects your health. Your sleep. You're getting ill. Your immune system is completely affected by people who are overtraining. And really overtraining is determined by the whole accumulation of all the stresses that's placed on the individual. Be that somebody who has a lack of sleep or is doing long hours of work, and them effects and how you're handling that has to be then moved into your training that you're doing. So you have to adapt your training for your lifestyle and what's going on. And if you don't do that, it's a great way to overtrain, and this is what we don't want to happen. So making sure that you're balanced and all that. Different people can cope different ways. So some people can cope better with external stresses and still get the training done, and some people can't have the external stresses, and certainly then you need to have a change in your actual training. So that's something that you need to do. Balancing your rest and recovery. Recovery is really when adaptations are made, and this must be balanced with your training. Okay, so rest periods, rest days have to be an integral part of your training and prioritized as much as your training days. So again, we're trying to make sure that you're combining the two essential areas of performance, both training and rest, and not neglecting one of them to bring over certainly an overtraining, and certainly an overtraining syndrome. Overtraining can be a gradual fall as well, so it's not something that occurs straight away. So looking for the early signs: decrease in performance, frequently ill, aches and pains, sleep, concentration levels, motivation. They're all great signs of overtraining. Once you start to see them signs, you've got to learn how your body works. You've got to realize, okay, this is a time to start stepping off and stepping back. Like I said at the start, it's not going to be regrettable for having a couple of rest days to try and freshen up. If you don't do it, then you're going to come into chronic fatigue, and certainly you're going to be a lot long further periods off the bike. Structuring your training. The biggest problem with amateurs who face is the not knowing when to back off and not knowing when to push too hard. And overtraining is hard to identify yourself, which is really why coaching and working with a coach can be crucial to balance this. And this is probably one of the biggest benefits that we see working with our clients, is avoiding this scenario, teaching them to balance and teaching them how we can still gain performances by recovery, by making sure structured rest is part of their total lifestyle. So again, gradual structured increases in your training, completed complemented by proper nutrition, enough rest, is really a general rule to prevent overtraining syndrome, and really starting to listen to your body and learn how your body works. So making sure all that's balanced. Dan, is there anything you feel like?
Yeah, I think just that obviously what can be counted as overtraining for one person is vastly different for another person. So
yeah,
if you're a full-time athlete and all you do is train, and overtraining for that person might be 20-25 hours a week. But if you're you know, if you've got a really intense job, family, a lot of stress, and you know, you could be overtrained on 10 hours a week. You know, it varies so much from person to person. So it's not really a case of looking at one individual and saying, right, how many hours a week you train? Oh, you're overtrained. It doesn't work like that at all. You know, it's not so much overtraining, it's under resting. So if you're getting in from work at 7 or 8 o'clock, 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock at night, then going on the turbo trainer, you're not getting off till 10 o'clock, you're not getting to bed till midnight, and then you're getting up again at 7 in the morning. You know, that way you can then start to get overtrained or under resting. Whereas if you have got a lot more time, then obviously, you know, it'll take a lot more training or to become overtrained. So it's not just a case of, you know, saying, oh, okay, I think I'm overtraining because I'm doing a certain amount of hours or a certain amount of miles on the bike. You know, you have to look at the whole lifestyle pattern.
Yeah. And again, something that we try and work out as hard as possible to make sure that's not something our athletes happen again. It's unfortunately sometimes it can be inevitable to hard and balance everything, but again, just try and focus on it quite a bit. Okay, dealing with illness, something everybody is affected by at one time or another. Unfortunately, it's something that, you know, we will be affected by in the future no matter what we do. But I suppose there's ways we can try and nullify it slightly and try and make sure that we get the most out of it. So, you know, most people have about 2 to 5 colds a year. You know, really when you get a cold, you know, you're looking at maybe 2 to 5 days in length. It lasts, depends on it. But, you know, that's the amount of time and the frequency that we probably do get ill. And again, you know, we're all very susceptible to it personally with families and young kids, or, you know, at work. Certainly the germs that can be spread and that people pick up, you know, we're always quite likely to I suppose, to pick up something. So, you know, how does it affect our training, how to handle colds and URTIs? You know, it really comes down to being able to prioritize your health over fitness. You know, making sure that we are not trying to try and do too much. Certainly during a time of illness, that's one of the big problems we see, is when people are still ill, that they're trying to train, and you're prolonging the actual, you're certainly prolonging the actual illness. And URTIs, well, upper respiratory tract infections or colds, really is probably the most common thing that we see. And sort of each illness leads to, you know, around maybe 4 to 10 days of reduced inactivity for those people that do get a cold. And, you know, whenever you look back at a winter or look back at a training phase, potentially you could have 2 colds or 2 upper respiratory tract infections over a period of 4 to 5 months. And whenever you see that each time that you get a cold, you might have, okay, 3 or 4 days off the bike, or maybe 10 days in total of substandard training to what would normally have done. All of a sudden you've got, you know, a cumulative of 20 days potentially of substandard training that you missed over that 4 or 5 month period, purely because you have 2 colds. So that's quite a chunk. Okay, so let's try and minimize that as much as possible, and let's try and recover from it, I suppose, as quick as possible. So, you know, that is really the effect it can have on your training. So leading to inconsistency certainly will have an effect in the long term on your performance. So that's why you want to make sure that you're not getting colds, or certainly getting anything as bad as possible. So you know, you with upper respiratory tract infections, it's usually in your nose and you know, in your certainly in your head, but not many treatments can really shorten the length of it. I know there's a lot of science and a lot of research being done out there on, you know, how to prevent colds and how to prevent certain infections. I know vitamin C and echinacea do have a lot of benefit in the prevention of getting colds. You know, I know speaking to you know, sports scientists and physiologists saying even around maybe 1,000 milligrams a day of of vitamin C will help stem or help keep away certain colds and certainly echinacea, but I'm not too sure on does it actually shorten the amount of time, the length of time that you will have a cold. Zinc sweets, very good. A lot of good science behind zinc lozenges are quite good when you do have a cold and trying to, I suppose, bring down the amount of time that you do have the infection. But one of the biggest areas, certainly when you do have colds and infections, is fluids. You know, dehydration, being dehydrated, is certainly a no-no whenever you are having a cold. Certainly dehydration is a very good way of picking up colds and flus or picking up infections. Certainly out training, being dehydrated and whatnot is not very good, but you know, you want to make sure that you obviously are prioritizing that, and again, not looking too far ahead and trying to look at your training, but trying to look at your health at these points in time. You know, each cold probably lasts maybe in around a week. You know, but if it lasts more than a week, sometimes this can be leading on to sort of bacterial infections. It can lead to fevers, and certainly whenever you start having a fever and it's starting to be a prolonged illness, that's whenever you got to start looking at, you know, stepping off the bike completely. With a general head cold, if it's not such a bad infection, usually reduced volume, reduced intensity in your training can still be done. Maybe other types of exercise can still be done, which generally isn't going to affect how long or how quick you're going to recover, as long as you know you're keeping that in check. But whenever you're starting to have the prolonged illness, you know, and you're having a fever, you're going to want to obviously start to make sure that you're getting off the bike, and especially if you have a fever, and especially if you're it's starting to go down into your chest. Of course, with any illness, we'd certainly advise speaking to the doctor and speaking to you know, any physicians to make sure that there's nothing more serious there. But again, I come back to the point of making health your priority and not your fitness. One of the things that we see is people want to get back training, want to get back on the bike, want to get back into the sessions. But at these points in time, you have to be healthy before you start progression. So really trying to do that. A rule of thumb that I suppose to try and stick to is for every day that you're sick, that you take another 2 days to recover. Again, this comes back to people coming back too quick after illness. So making sure that you are not coming back too quick, and again, you're maybe prolonging the time to recovery to full recovery, or you're going to come back towards a relapse, or maybe your immune system never fully recovers, and you then see yourself getting colds and infections quite regular after that. That's because you've come back too quick. So, you know, poor choices of food and nutrition can lead to illness. Lifestyle, you know, not having the adequate nutrition on the bike, being dehydrated in the bike. It's the winter time, people put up a lot of clothes, they sweat a lot. Again, you know, just because it's the winter time doesn't mean you don't hydrate. Hydrate, prioritize the same as what you do in the summer as what you do in the winter. Having adequate nutrition on the bike. Again, we done a webinar recently with Rob van der Werf. Again, if you check our website, you'll see, you know, hours worth of information on nutrition and how it can affect your immune system and certainly your training, which will go a wee bit more in depth. But you know, prioritize that in your lifestyle. Sleep is crucial again for your immune system and stemming off any illnesses and infections. So again, look at your lifestyle and making the right choices there. How to begin training after an illness. So what we're looking at is, you know, increasing the frequency of your training, then followed by your volume, and then followed by intensity. And if you stick to these 3 steps, as well as the rule of thumb of taking 2 days off for every day of, you know, illness, you're gonna be progressively getting better to full health and then to full fitness. But if you don't stick to these rules, and if you don't prioritize your health over fitness, then you're going to see yourself leading into more regular illnesses and not recovering fully. So certainly, you know, basic steps is speak to your doctor, making sure that you're prioritizing your health, looking at adequate steps taken to come out of the illness as quickly as possible, changing your lifestyle, and sticking to the rule of thumb of 2 days for every day of sickness, and then gradually getting the frequency back in your training, starting to add the volume to that frequency, and then building the intensity again. So, Dan, is there anything you would like to add to that?
Yeah. Again, like I said, prevention is better than cure, and one thing I always used to do at this time of year was to have a flu jab, and I went years and years. Never, I used to get a few illnesses, little colds and things, but nothing major. But never the flu. And I used to hear all these stories about people getting the flu and man flu and how it knocks you about and all this sort of thing. And I used to think, there's no such thing really. But then last year I didn't have the flu jab for whatever reason. Around February time I got the flu, and it really, really did knock me around for about 2 weeks. I missed a lot of training and just generally didn't feel very good whatsoever. So it's just last week I went and made sure I got the flu jab. So that would be one thing I would definitely recommend doing at this time of year, is going and getting the flu jab, and just as a precaution really, and hopefully then you won't get the flu and you won't miss too much training.
Yeah, it certainly is. I had a winter where I had actually, I think, 3 colds, maybe 3 infections over a period of 5 months. And when I look back, I actually had well over a month of really substandard inactivity. And when you look at the winter time, it was a considerable chunk out of getting proper structured training in, and certainly had a negative effect on my performances come early season. So certainly try and keep that in check. Okay, so we have a few questions. I know we've run over a wee bit. We've had quite a bit to go through there, so apologies, but thank you for everybody for staying on. Just a couple of questions here. We'll try and come through. If anybody else wants to post some up, I'll try and get through a number. Dan, one here on the PowerCal on a turbo trainer. I know some of our people have used the PowerCal before, which I think is it kind of works out your it's an approximate of wattage. Do you have any experience
with PowerCal? So a PowerCal works. It's a heart rate monitor strap that was made by PowerTap that basically takes your heart rate and turns that into power. I'm a big fan of PowerTap products. PowerTap P1 pedals, they're really good. I'm trying to choose my words carefully, but I would say as far as the PowerCal goes, PowerTap make really good power meters, and I think we'll probably leave it at that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of really good products out there in the market, and not so much of a different price range.
I have tried using it myself, and it doesn't compare very favourably to an actual power meter. So while it's a very cheap alternative to a power meter, I think if you're going to spend, I think it's they're like £50 for a heart rate strap, and I think if a power meter costs £600 upwards, you can kind of understand why it's not quite.
Yeah.
It's not quite up to standard.
Not quite as specific as I suppose is used in power. But okay, so another one here. Somebody asking, what is my view on CrossFit as an approach to strength and core training? I think CrossFit is certainly getting more and more popular in the general communities and people and whatnot. As for being cycling specific, I'm probably not up to speed in exactly what is done or what is required within CrossFit, but I come back to the same: is it specific to cycling? Is the movements in it specific to cycling, or is the movements and the exercise that you're doing is just purely building strength generally? So for me, I always go back to making it as targeted as possible. So you would probably get more out of making very specific cycling related exercises, core workouts, than maybe just doing CrossFit. And again, what we see is people going in to do something like CrossFit, which obviously has different dynamics, different movements, different biomechanics. And if you're going into it from being a cyclist all spring and all summer into that, the likelihood of, I suppose, the likelihood of getting injured is quite high. Another one here, Dan, just on somebody asking how many during your peak preparation phase for the season, how many sweet spot sessions would you do in a week? I suppose it depends maybe on your level of fitness, but Dan, how many, is there anything on?
I think probably 3 or 4, breaking up into blocks. So some days you might only do 1 20-minute block. Some days you might do, 2, maybe even 3 blocks, on a longer weekend ride. I think 3 to 4 sessions of sweet spot a week would be about right.
Yeah. Okay. And just one last one here, just from somebody here about asking for those of us who don't want to bulk up with cross training, is our own body weight sufficient for strength training, or should it be light weights? But first of all, certainly cross training, core strength work and whatever, we're not looking generally, depending on your objectives, to really bulk up so much. I think Dan mentioned it that, increased muscle mass doesn't really mean, increasing efficiency, which leads to increased performance. What we try and look at, and certainly what we have done with with a lot of our clients, is looking at your stability. So not just building strength, but your muscle stability, thus leading on to a better efficiency on the bike. And this, of course, can be done through using your own body weights, through using certain exercises and structures. You can do the step up blocks. You can use stairs. You can use different things that isn't requiring weights. But I do know a lot of our guys, we certainly recommend maybe even use the Swiss ball type stuff, or certainly a lot of the lighter weights. But for focusing on strength, stability and strength, you're looking at people getting a neutral spine and making sure this is in check and trying to stay injury free and isolated muscle movements. I don't really believe that we need to be pushing heavy weights. I'm certainly looking to boosting or bulk as much as possible. I think we're looking at, again, stability and core strength, which again can be manipulated by body weight, but potentially as well by, I suppose, some of the bands and some of the lighter weights, and again some of the boxes and stuff we can use. So yeah. So listen, everybody, I'd like to thank everyone for staying with us for so long. We've had a really, really big turnout. If anybody would like to email us further about our services, would like to know more about our personalised coaching packages, about our power meters, nutrition consultations, turbo trainers or rollers, or certainly with Pactimo clothing, if anybody would like anything, certainly drop us an email to info@digdeepcoaching.com. You'll all be receiving an email from us later on anyway, in the coming days. Keep an eye out for our Bike Fit webinar, which is coming up in the middle of November. We'll be sending out emails on that. Please follow us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter. We're posting up lots of brilliant info there each day. You'll keep an eye out for a lot of our offers that we're doing. But again, I'd like to thank everybody who attended here this evening. Hopefully you've all learnt something. Hopefully we're able to help a wee bit on your road towards a better 2016, and we look forward to seeing you all again soon.
Okay, thank you very much for attending.
Bye-bye.